In my 20s, I had a transfixing moment in Glacier National Park. My partner at the time was a professional photographer and had gone off to capture images. And I was walking on a path not very far away from the lodge, not anywhere spectacular, not anywhere hard to get to, when I stopped to rest on a rock. It was a temperate day, not hot. The rock beneath me felt pleasant and warm. And then I looked up and I realized that I was eye to eye with a pika. And we just sat there, me and the small rodent who trilled at me some chirps in a language I didn't quite understand. But we continued to keep company for quite a long time, eyes locked. I wasn't, as I said, on some far path or hard stretch. I was just on the regular path that went down to the lodge. But this moment was deeply conversational, and I've remembered it all my life. We looked at each other, and it was as if we were sharing the stories of our lives. "What are you doing here?" she was asking me. "What kind of animal are you?" When Melissa texted me a link to the article from which I read from during our reflection, to the accompaniment of her beautiful photographs, she mentioned that she and her beloved, Elisabeth Andresen, had been talking about it over breakfast and thought it would make an excellent sermon, and I read it and I completely agreed. How fortunate we were that in their infinite generosity of time, money, and attention, Elisabeth and Melissa chose to bid on our Bid for Love sermon last year, and so here we are. I want to go back to just a few of Francis Cesaro's words. "I'm a climber, skier, trail runner, but each time I went out, I felt oddly disconnected from those very same places I pined after. I sought them feverishly, yet when I arrived, I felt like a foreigner, a squatter even, never at peace. The mountains had lost their joy. In truth, I was lonely and a bit desperate." Melissa, we found out in our conversation in preparing for this sermon, has a morning walking practice, as do I. And Elisabeth is a procurer of many outdoor sports involving mountains. At first, I was really focused on the part where it commended the title of this article, sort of as walking as life. And yes, there's a lot of health benefits, including spiritual health, to walking. As I kept reading it over and over the last months and weeks, I realized that the real point, though, really was the issue about how we are in relationship with the nature that we engage with and how we might learn a different concept of relationship. The New York Times opinion piece from which I read was inspired by author Barry Lopez, who before his death in 2022 wrote an essay called A Literature of Place, which went viral, in which he wrote, "Over time, I have come to think of these three qualities: paying intimate attention, a storied relationship to a place rather than a solely sensory awareness of it, and living in some sort of ethical unity with a place as fundamental human defense against loneliness. If you are intimate with a place whose history you're familiar with, and you establish an ethical conversation with it, the implication that follows is this: the place knows you're there. It feels you. You will not be forgotten, cut off, abandoned. Many here know how you come to love a place, to know it like you might know a lover, the curves of the land, the shapes of the trees, the positions from which the stars can be observed at different seasons of the year. How we travel through places determines our contact. Geologist and author John McPhee has written, "Travel, for example, by canoe is not a necessity and will never more be the most efficient way to go from one region to another, or even from one lake to another anywhere. Yet a canoe trip has become simply a rite of oneness with certain terrain, a diversion off the field, an art performed not because it is a necessity, but because there is a conversation in the art itself." These ideas about ways that we perceive new synergy in our relationships with the natural world may be more vital than we think, a source of wisdom we need. As the world of human creation has become more difficult, more anguished, more demanding, many of us are seeking relationships beyond the human-to-human discourse that is often still so life-affirming and nurturing. As we gather here in a sanctuary and the extension through our online gathering, we're part of a faith community, and of course the earliest ideas of reverence and worship had to do with the natural world, about which people were struggling to understand, and animals as well, as events like the solar eclipse we had yesterday proved, because we were on campus, some of us, and what we noticed is that none of the animals, who are almost always present these days, were around. It was as if they were trying to puzzle out what they could figure out about what was happening yesterday, as the sunlight was different. If the world has taught us nothing in this searing 2020, it's that we're living in a brutal imbalance where personal wants are crushing our chances for collective survival. Barry Lopez, who was famous for his writings about wild and very exotic places, in his later years expressed regrets about the ways his writings about the Arctic and other areas increased global travel to those places. For, as he noted, travel is now a major contributor to climate decimation. He wondered and researched what it was we are ordering overnight with such volume, using global transportation systems that have been so expanded with the expectation of everything coming the next day. In a PBS interview that was just a year or so before his death, he mourned that his research found that it was more likely that what was being overnighted wasn't medicine or something vital. More often it was things like golf balls, or as he said, just junk. Morning walks through one's neighborhood environment might begin that gentle tipping of the scales. Starhawk, an author and community leader known for her work on pagan and feminist practices, now teaches permaculture practices to put people back in regenerative relationship with the earth. I find it's really helpful, she says, to have a practice that takes me out of my head and puts me into my body. It's about opening up, watching, looking, and listening. Francis Cesaro says that our concept of our relationship with nature needs to be reimagined. He notes that it's increasingly about acquisition and reward and conquering, and I think that was so illustrated by Ives' story about the cutting down of the giant tree. For example, if I go for a walk in nature, is it because I'm there to get something out of it, better health, as opposed to the way in which we have coffee with a friend or take care of each other in times of need? A walk for my health at some level, he is suggesting, is transactional, whereas coffee is a relationship with mutuality. And that is the kind of relationship more and more people are saying we need with a wider and wider expanse of life. Cesara's reflection is that he sought experiences to conquer nature initially, which he saw as what centuries of nature writing had taught him to do. To repeat his words, I was neither attentive nor meeting the wild on its own terms. I was merely trying to prize something from the wild for my own benefit, which means I wasn't seeing the wild at all. Lopez notes that this attitude is grounded in the colonial frames of conquering nature to put its resources into markets for profits. For those of us who believe in our deepest beliefs, which are grounded in the inevitability of human progress, these have been difficult years. Many of us are still waiting for that clear path to open, to see where we can reverse the course that seems to be taking our nation and now in our world down places that we think we know we do not want to go. Those who have looked to the wisdom of the earth, people like Starhawk, are saying it is going to be through our conversations with the natural world, our stories and our imagining, our honoring of relationships that are already here, because we are already interdependent with the natural world, even if we need to deepen in our understanding of that. Our relationship with nature isn't like our relationship with our new couch or some other widget. It's something that's deep and interactive, as Melissa experiences when she travels among the flowers and plants of her neighborhood in early morning rambling. And our relationships with other parts of the human family as well need to recognize that interdependence as well. The world in which we are in requires grounding in many ways. If we are not grounded, we will find ourselves overwhelmed by anxiety and fear. Perhaps it is important to ground ourselves on the very ground of the earth to do so. How? Barry Lopez suggests this: be silent, leave home the bird book, the analytic state of mind, any compulsion to identify, and just sit still. Concentrate instead on feeling a place, on deliberately using the sense of proprioception. Where is this volume of space in which you are situated? Listen, use your ears to hear the acoustic hemisphere you occupy. What sort of air is it moving, the bird song? Open a vertical line to the place by joining the color and form of the sky to what you see on the ground. We have choices before us, and they all depend on how we see our connections to one another in the largest sense, including those that we consider to be the natural world, of which we are a part. We need to understand that not all of us need to take the same course of action. Tomorrow, some of us need to witness to the pain of those among us who are directly affected by the events of this week, whose loved ones have been irreparably touched by shocking violence. Others of us need to call our president and remind him that war does not end our responsibility to humanitarian standards. Others of us may just need to take a morning walk through our neighborhood and look at the flowers and begin that shift of attitude so that we can remember that all life requires and deserves deep reverence. Perhaps the additional wisdom found in dialogues with trees and flowers, animals and stars will keep us grounded enough to remember that we need to remain engaged with each other, with the flowers, the birds, the trees, the stars, and with other human beings. Perhaps this will change our hearts. Starcock observed recently that we used to say that peace in the world would start in our own heart. And now she says, part of how we make peace within ourselves is to just try to make it in the world. As we shift our concepts away to understand how much we need everything alive, may it start with a simple journey or hearing another's pain. Perhaps in that frame, a new, uniting, healing story emerges. So may it be.